Next item on the agenda item 7.02, the bridge plan, extended learning, and summer school. And so back to Dr. Kellogg, Dr. Hopkins, and Dr. Ebrecht. So all of the doctors are in the house.
Thank you, President Bell and members of the board. So we're much more excited, not that we aren't excited to report that everything's going well with Together Again, but we're even more excited to talk about what's in front of us. And so just a little bit of history here, as I've shared with the board in the past. Somewhere around winter break, there's a group of superintendents that I meet with informally frequently, Hilliard, Dublin, Upper Arlington, Worthington, myself, and then Grandview Heights. We meet periodically. And in one of those conversations back in the cold days of winter, we started talking about when we come back and planning for coming back. And the thought at that time was, it would be really wise for us to kind of collaborate on this. We all know that really we've been following similar paths for months and making similar decisions along the way, some timing differences, some logistical differences, but basically much the same way. And we just thought it would be a great idea if we work collectively together on what would be next. So we began that work, and then lo and behold, Ohio put in place the requirement for an extended learning plan from every school district due April 1. Notably, this extended learning plan that the governors said we should do is not anywhere in any legislation. So it's like a really heavily regarded advice or recommendation that we're going to follow and provide. So we had already begun working on that. And then, so what you're going to see this evening as we go through this is at the front end of this is really the bridge piece, which is a much more robust, longer ranging, malleable plan over time. And that we can fit into it the smaller component of the requirements for the extended learning plan that'll be in place. You're going to hear a lot tonight about the coming summer, but that's just part of it. So really, this is something to take us out the next 18 months. So it's not just the summer of 21, it's through the summer of 22 is where we're looking. So, and not just the summers, it's also during the school year. We're already doing things now as part of our recovery plan and working with our students. And then we're just going to build on that going into the summer. So there's a little background in history. So we're going to talk about the bridge piece. I'll share that with you. Next slide, please, Joel. So really, we want to start with success in mind, and I'm just going to pull some words out of here. Notice consistent conversation. This is going to evolve over time as we put things in place, see how they're working, see what impact they're having, see what we're missing. So this is not a everything's done in pen and done right away. This is everything's done in pencil and evolves as we go, and we meet student needs as we start to measure those. And key to this is it's a framework, and we want to look at both the academic and social and emotional needs of our students and our staff and our families. We'll talk about that a little bit more too as we go along. And we just want to continue to look at innovations and how we can engage effectively, both on scale as we talk to large groups of people, which we really recently did through a thought exchange, and how we can work with individual families on their needs and their children's needs. So the engagement piece stretches across that. Next slide, Jill. And so we know there's new realities. Rule number one that we're living under is everybody, students, staff, families, has been impacted by this pandemic. We've all suffered some form of anxiety, trauma. It's just not a matter of scale, right? Some folks, it impacted them less than others, but it's impacted all of us. So we want to start from that frame that let's just assume everybody was impacted and treat each other that way, the wellness side as well as the academic side, and not assume anybody was immune to any of the effects of the pandemic, and just know that that's an important piece. But we do know there's disparities, not only about how individuals are affected by the pandemic, but how people's individual circumstances going into the pandemic were different. We know that, the differences in our student populations and their needs, and that got magnified as part of this. So really understanding each individual student, which is always important, is going to be increasingly important this time. And the other piece is to realize that this is not going to be an overnight success. It's going to take time and progress and continuing monitoring data and looking at how we're doing. It's got to be holistic. There's been a lot of, I keep hearing learning gaps, lost learning. we had lost learning opportunities. We made progress, maybe not as much progress as we'd like. To call it that we went backwards is kind of a misnomer. We may not have made as much progress, and in fact, it's we are finding that there are pockets of kids that thrived, did very well in this environment. And so we don't want to just make assumptions about that, but we do want to look at those learning opportunities and what we missed out on. And really want this to be positive. So I've said this before, kind of this unique situation a couple weeks ago. It's probably been mitigated as kids have been back in school, but about a month ago, our kids were pretty much chomping at the bit to come back. They were really excited to come back. We had this great moment where 15,000 kids and their families were pretty excited to be back in school, and that's unique. You don't want to ruin that by pounding people over the head with negative messages and gaps and telling them what they're not good at and what they lost. What attracts kids to school aren't gaps. What attracts kids to school are things that match up with their aspirations, match up with their interests and their desires. And that was missing too. So we want to make sure we're reconnecting to those parts as we move forward. And you'll see some of that in our summer school thinking as well. So that school is that positive, exciting place where our students find themselves growing, developing aspirations and developing plans for their aspirations, and not just hitting them with lost learning opportunities and gaps in their math and books they didn't read. We can fix all that. So we want to be very positive and intentional about that. Next slide, Jill. So I mentioned there was 6 of us who kind of got together. I will tell you that since then we have presented the framework to school districts all across Central Ohio, and we had actually a phone conversation today. It was a share and compare session where there are about 40 of us on the call representing school districts from all over Central Ohio. So new players have joined in, and today was about sharing what we're doing and comparing what we're doing, so we can gain ideas from each other, see what people are doing around this framework. And that's really powerful. It's a powerful message. You know, the 6 districts that are in place represent 60,000 students. So the programming we're putting in place has a huge impact for Central Ohio, and we understand that. We define a lot of the points around this: data, collaborative, comprehensive. A lot of focus on, we already know how to do this. Addressing students' learning gaps and even addressing students' wellness needs isn't novel to us. That's core to what we do. So we have this expertise, we have a lot of these resources. It's now just looking at scale and diversifying that to meet more students' needs. And so we wanted this plan to build on what we have, to share, to be able to be replicated, to provide allowance for school districts to make it fit their individual needs. So it's not, the framework isn't prescriptive as much as it is descriptive of what you can do and what you should work on. Because it's being deployed. I mean, we were on a conversation today. One of our share and compare sessions was with Heath. It's a small school district out in Licking County, but it was a great conversation as they talked about data with their gifted kids and what they've discovered. And they've been in all year. So with some learning points for us, it's something they had uncovered we hadn't seen yet that gave us pause to say we should go look at that. So we're learning from each other. We also know it's got to be an iterative process of talking to our building administrators and our teachers. What's working, what's not working, what do we need to focus on? So that's kind of the process piece. Next slide, Jill, thank you. So from that, we really framed 4 points of progress, and underneath those, some big levers of impact. What are the parts of the system that we can use to leverage positive movement in towards these points of progress? And it is intentional that social and emotional well-being is the lead. And that's not just students, that's staff. Our staff are tired. It's been emotional for them in a lot of different ways, for a lot of different reasons, not just work. And so helping them recharge, helping them get their feet back on the ground, helping them relax a little bit as we go into summer and going into next year is going to be very, very important. And our students and our families. So we know we have partnerships already in our district that we can leverage. For example, Concord, Warm, we've already leveraged those. We can continue to leverage those, as well as our own data sets, like with our social emotional well-being. We've been using Panorama and collecting that data for several years now. So we have baseline, pre-pandemic, and current, and see how those numbers are impacting. We can drill that down to individual students if we want to. So we have those tools in place to leverage. Academic achievement, we threw the kitchen sink at this thing going into it, and then had to clean up some of the dishes along the way. But we've learned a lot. We have a lot of tools at our hands. And again, this is what we do. We know how to do this part. We know how to build summer school. We know how to do this part. Culture and climate, one of the important things on this we talked a lot about is the professional development for our staff. We learned a lot about public education and its importance in our community and what's important to our kids through this experience. And it wasn't so much that we went, oh, I didn't know that, as much as we went, oh, I didn't know it was that important. Relationships far exceeded importance to technology. And so we got to capitalize on what we know works with our kids and create that kind of climate and that growth mindset, not this thinking that this is as far as someone's going to go. What is the growth potential? I'll steal a quote I heard from a superintendent who probably stole it from someplace else, or borrowed it from someplace else. But this is about growth mindset and the success of our kids and the long-term trajectory, not the moment. And then equity and accessibility, which goes hand in hand of a lot of what we've been talking about in this district and in our community across the country for a while now, as we looked at social justice issues of racism that are embedded in the inequities in systems now that were there beforehand, were there in some of our data sets beforehand that we're working on, got more of a spotlight on them during this time period. And so there's a kind of a synergism around the focus on equity and equity education that's been going on, that's driven us, and this moment that's been created by this pandemic moving us forward. So we understand that. And we also know we have additional resources available to us, coming to us financially as well to capitalize on. So those are the points of progress, leverage points that we're going to use internally. Next slide, Jill. And of course, there's always student-centered focus, right? That should be at the center of the whole thing. What we really don't want is to allow this moment to start typecasting students based on the opportunities they weren't able to access because of the pandemic. It's not about them and who they are. It's about the opportunities that they didn't have the ability to access. And so it shouldn't define them. It should define the system and what the system needs to do to capitalize on their strengths as students. We know that, as someone said, talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. And that's really what we've seen. And we're excited to work on it. So flexibility, looking at what's effective for students. Some are going to be at high risk and need a lot of intervention. Others, their intervention may be less academic, more wellness. We're starting to see that play out in schools now that we're in third week. Some of the social emotional wellness issues of our students, the disruptions of their families are starting to play out in schools a little bit. And that's a good thing, because school's a safe place for that to happen. We have the resources, we have the people to address that. Isolated at home is not the best place for that to play itself out. So we're ready for that. Others have made progress academically, and we don't want to make assumptions that they have not. And we're also talking a lot about families and students having more voice. To point, we used our thought exchange tool and asked families and students and staff, as you project to summer, what might be some things we want to put in place. You're going to see some of that play out in Dr. Hopkins and the team talking about tonight. So we need to continue that. Next slide, Jill. Of course, data is very important. My caution here is we are inundated with data. Some of it is measuring things that have importance to some stakeholders and policymakers, but not importance to all of us for various reasons. So we don't want to chase an endpoint at the other side of a gap that's an endpoint at the other side of a gap that really isn't that meaningful to us. We want to chase meaningful points of reference, meaningful data sets. So we have some data, and there's probably some points of data we don't have that we're going to need to have. We're going to have some blank spots that we haven't measured that we want to take a look at. But overall, I think we have the things in place. It's just a matter of focusing on what the key target's going to be. We know grades. We know credits earned. We have iReady data. We have the points of reference, attendance data. We have points of reference to use to help us as we move along. so we can pace things, group students, et cetera, and make sure that they're ready. It'll be more district-centric on the assessments we have and the information we have than it will be on state assessments. Next slide, Jill. The community engagement piece is not going to, it cannot be a one-time thing. It has to be an ongoing iterative process at scale, various scales, from individual families contacting their schools, their teacher, their principal, the school council, whatever else they might need, to larger scales of reaching back out to the community saying, how's this working for us? Is this not working for us? What do you think of this? And making sure we're digging in. And already we're seeing community partners reaching out and wanting to work with us as we evolve back into this. And what are the opportunities that are going to be available to us as we move along in the future that we can capitalize on and tap into? And we've created some of those, right? Internally, our virtual success coaches, working with WEF on some of the tutoring services that we've provided. We've made some partnerships that have benefited us that we want to capitalize on as we move further, and we appreciate all those that come to the table to do that with us. And next slide, please, Jill. And my most important parting thought in this is just trying to build this kind of Central Ohio coalition of school districts around this framework and sharing ideas with each other and capitalizing on that and starting to tell stories to our public about what our various school districts are doing post-pandemic moving forward. Because I think there's a story to tell post-pandemic about capitalize on the value our public schools have to our communities. What value we had during this difficult time and what value we have moving forward. That's an opportunity to build that community support and trust that we value so much. It's also an opportunity to start influencing policymakers moving forward on what works and what will not work moving forward, not just financially, but everything from how we view attendance to discipline to state assessments. What's valuable to us and what's not valuable to us. I think there's a key moment here to capitalize on moving forward. So really want to use that opportunity, and that's part of the conversation we're having as we move forward. So with that, we're going to transition over from the general parts of the framework. Before I do, any questions, comments about the framework before I turn it over to the teaching and learning team and let them talk to you more specifically about the components of our extended learning plan moving forward?
Just one point, John. This is almost like a compact, if you will. It's not just a compact with the districts that are working together, but as we look at what you put on here, I was seeing it as a compact with our community. And I am wondering, as we go forward, if we can publish it in many ways as a compact. This is what we pledged to do. This is why we're doing it. And I view that as an important part of that trust development that we have, that we really need to do. It's been a tough year, and a lot of people are tired and frayed around the edges and need to know from us how we're going to be taking care of this. And I would like to see us take this work that you've just presented and publish it.
It's a good idea.
I would just like to thank you for not only participating in this endeavor, but also the leadership that you have helped to bring to the table and bringing Westerville to be a part of this process. You and I have had many conversations about this very thing. And so I want to thank you for that, as well as the other superintendents and other districts that are participating in this process. I think it is going to be very, very beneficial for us to adopt more of a regional approach to this instead of a hit and miss, each district going about it their own way, trying to figure things out on their own. Working together, I believe, is going to be the best route for all of us to take. So thank you very much for participating and being a very important part of this process.
So, Dr. Kellogg, I have two quick points of clarification I'm wondering if you can help with. We talked a little, or you talked a little bit about the framework and academically and social emotionally. Can you paint a picture of like what you're thinking about there? I guess I was hoping for a little bit more.
So I think you'll see more in the second part of this from Dr. Hopkins and the curriculum instruction team in terms of some specific programming that we're building that represent the components of this framework, what we're going to do in terms of addressing wellness needs for students and what we're doing to start working on the academic pieces as well. Is that what you're looking for, Mrs. Davidson?
So you're saying there are pieces connected that we're going to hear in the next part that we'll go back to that. Okay.
Yep, I think you'll hear some specificity to that will start to reflect, oh, okay, I see what they're doing as it relates to wellness or just starting to work with students' academic needs and starting to think about staff and their needs moving forward. Yeah.
Okay. And then the culture and climate and integrated choices for students and family, is that also going to be in the second part?
Yeah. Yeah, you'll start to see components of that. And really, what you're going to see tonight is the first month's worth of work that's in place that gets us going. Some of it is really, as you'll see, work we've done before that we're going to replicate because it works. But then you're going to start to see how we're building around that to expand that out to some of these other pieces. So I think Dr. Hopkins and his team will help with that.
Okay, great.
So can I turn it over to Dr. Hopkins and his team? You guys are on.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, everyone. President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall, it's my pleasure to add a little more specificity to the Bridges concept that Dr. Kellogg had just spoken about. First of all, I certainly want to thank the entire teaching and learning team. It's been a very collaborative approach to arrive at some of these identified solutions. As Dr. Kellogg said, the governor asked for us by April 1st to develop a plan, and it's called an extended learning plan, and it focused specifically on two things: addressing academic and addressing social emotional needs. So that's what this plan is going to do. But even more than just a required compliance-driven plan, we really want to reiterate that we are looking for what can best meet the needs of our learners and our teachers, our educators, and our administrators throughout the district. So I always try to look at things with a positive, optimistic mindset. And one of the great things about being required to do a plan is to celebrate and to identify things that we've already been doing that have been proving to have some great dividends for us. As you know, we've been addressing the social emotional needs of our students and our families by through Tammy Santa and her team, really reaching out to families, driving to families and supporting them. Carrie Dennis and her team have been providing families with much needed meals to support them during this time. Our secondary department has already started some academic supports where they have initiated some targeted approaches for students who are falling behind, whether it's for graduation or just grade advancement. So there are a lot of things that are already going in place. And this plan, what it seeks to do is to identify these areas of success and recognize other opportunities for growth as we move forward. Now, recognizing that this plan must address the needs of all of our learners, our entire teaching and learning team has been involved in the development of this plan. We have incorporated feedback from a number of sources, and Dr. Kellogg mentioned a thought exchange that hundreds of our parents, our students, and staff have responded to find out ways that we can immediately address some of these learning gaps and social emotional issues over the summer. So we're so appreciative of their feedback, and one thing that I can pledge to them is we are going to continue to come back to them and seek more feedback so that we can engage, or better yet, re-engage our students in our community in a positive way. What you see on the screen in front of you here are the four kind of pillars that the state has asked for us to use to help guide our work. And I'll be speaking to these four, but I'll also be expanding on. The first one is identification. We recognize that the stakes are extremely high at this time to reach our students and identify their needs, who they are, and how we can help them grow. So we are already using iReady data in our kindergarten almost through 8th grade levels to identify specifically what students are needing support. And I really do appreciate all of our departments, but especially our elementary department has done a great job to use iReady this year to specifically identify students and invite them to come to our summer school learning programs, which Dr. Ebrecht will talk about in a little bit. So instead of just guessing and inviting a few, we've been using data very intentionally to make sure that the students that are in most need of supports are coming. And then once they come, we're going to be using this data to identify specific learning gaps. So again, we're not guessing. We're using multiple high-quality data sets to ensure that we are providing the foundational literacy and math supports that are so needed for our early learners to make sure that they experience success. And then if there have been any learning gaps, that they can remediate and improve upon those as quickly as possible. So again, iReady data, other sources of data are being used intentionally to identify, and we're going to continue to use those data sorts and other data points along the way. And for the socio-emotional, some of that data points is going to come from Panorama and other things that Tammy and her group have been using. Under the resources and partnerships, as Dr. Kellogg mentioned, we're so fortunate in Westerville to have great partnerships with WARM, with the Parks and Recreation. And one of the things that we have specifically started to work with is the Westerville Public Library. I've been working with our district equity team, our family and communication subgroup has been looking at how can we reach some of our students who don't have library cards, for example. So we've been partnering with them to ensure that at the start of the next school year, every student who doesn't have a library card will have an opportunity to have one. And we know that library cards are a lot different than they were when we had them, when it just opened up books to people. We want to make sure that the library card and the online resources and all of the additional benefits that come with it now are being given to all of our students to help them and ensure that they are successful. So again, one of our things that we're going to be very, very intentional about is not only leveraging the partnerships that we have, but also creating new partnerships so that we can move forward with them along the way. In the approaches section, and this is probably the most specific one I'll be getting into, is looking at what have we learned in the past year. We constantly hear a desire to return to the normal school year. And although we are also grateful to have our kids back in a more normal learning environment, when we return next year, we're not going to be coming back to the normal school year. And I mean that in a positive way because we've learned so much this year. We've learned new things that work. And some of it is the online technology, the use of Schoology, the use of some online resources that have helped so many students who through a preferred learning modality thrive in this way. So we're not going to throw that away. We're going to continue to use that. We're going to continue to use what works to ensure that next school year, this summer, next school year, and the years after that are leveraging what we've learned in the past year to ensure that all of our learners with learning differences have opportunities to be successful in their learning. So again, I mentioned the Schoology. I also wanted to mention what our teachers have been doing at the elementary level and will be starting to do at the secondary level, and that's the development and refinement of online curriculum resources. We have learned that there's been a gap there, and there's been an opportunity through some of this new funding to develop some of these online resources by our teachers, for our teachers, to support our learners, to ensure that they are being able to, again, address all the different learning modalities that our students have learned. We're also being very specific about addressing needs of our students with learning differences. We're seeing that some of our interventions need to be refined. We're learning that some of our MTSS and RTI efforts are there, but maybe need to be, again, enhanced a little bit and try to explore how we can best utilize them. So we're going to be using some of the ESSER grant funds to specifically re-examine these procedures and processes and see how they can work best. As a parent of students with learning differences, I know that there are such positive outcomes that can come when you just try something differently and you provide students with just-in-time support so that they can thrive moving forward. And that's what we're going to do. We're also looking at adding preschool to our summer learning this year. That's something new that Gertie Glass, Suzanne Kyle, and others are going to do with our students with disabilities in our preschool, I say downstairs here at the Early Learning Center, and give them an opportunity to continue the learning that has been interrupted through this year so that as they mature on to kindergarten, we can address some of these skills and some potential gaps along the way as early as possible. I also want to address that our English learners population population. Dr. Lucy Rader Brown and I have been having some really strong conversations about how we can support some of our EL teachers with new professional development that's going to ensure that literacy, for example, I know Dr. Salisbury is going to be on a little bit later possibly to talk with Ms. Relford, but I've been privileged to be part of a Know Better, Do Better learning on literacy foundational work. And some of that similar work is going to be provided to our EL teachers to support them so they can support our EL learners. And finally, there in that alignment section, we're being very intentional about developing a plan that's consistent with our district academic and equity efforts. It's very easy, and I've been guilty of this in the past, is when you're asked to write a new plan, you just add more to the plate. And that's not what we're wanting to do with this. We want to make sure we use this plan and the accompanying resources to support and refine our existing efforts. We have been doing great things for many, many years, and we want to use this plan to, if you will, intensify and to target our and focus our efforts to support our staff during these times. Jill, if you can move to the next slide. In summary, again, what does our plan include? We're going to be using high quality data sources, strong professional learning opportunities by our staff and for our staff. Evidence-based, targeted, standards-based academic interventions. We want to use what we know works that's going to be helping all of our learners. And I failed to mention a little bit earlier, I was on a roll talking about our gifted learners. That's another group that we have been intentionally looking at to ensure. I know Dr. Kellogg mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation with Heath's district earlier today, but we want to make sure that we're addressing any gaps that students who have been identified as gifted may have to address the learning of all of our students there. I've shared this plan with WEA leadership. We're going to continue to evaluate and monitor this plan. This plan is a fluid, dynamic plan that will be needed to change. We're going to be committed to making course corrections along the way and through having those ongoing evaluation mechanisms to ensure alignment and to ensure that we're guiding our processes there. So with that, before I close and feel free to answer any questions you may have, I certainly do want to again thank my entire teaching and learning team for their incredible work over the past few weeks to develop a plan that I think is putting us on the right path for success for our students and for our community. So are there any questions before I pass it along to Dr. Ebrecht, who's going to add a little more specificity about our summer school programs?
I have a couple questions, if you don't mind, Dr. Hopkins.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for this. I really appreciate all the work that goes into it. And my first question was just if you could talk about the process of developing the plan. And I'm wondering what role that teaching staff have had in these conversations, just so that I can sort of visualize how things are coming about.
Right. No, that's a great question. Like I said, I have been sharing this plan with the WEA leadership, and many of our teachers on special assignment up here at the curriculum office have been instrumental in the development of this plan. We've been intentional to have the thought outreach, the community, the thought exchange to get feedback from teachers and staff to learn what they would like to see in summer learning programs, and we're going to continue to involve them. I'm trying to also be respectful of, we have been asking them a lot in the last couple of weeks about surveys. So I want to be respectful of the fact that they are incredibly busy doing amazing things in the classroom. But as I mentioned, we are going to be committed to including them along the way to ensure that this plan is meeting their needs.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you know, we have this plan, and as you mentioned, we have lots of plans, sure. And the plans sort of stack together, right? And so I'm assuming that, but just want to sort of talk it out for a second, that this plan will then require us to revisit some of those other plans and maybe make some adjustments to them. So I'm just wondering if you can, talk about whether you've identified some places where, that exist in other plans that we definitely want to revisit, or is that sort of the kind of analysis that's going on right now?
You know, that's a great point, and that's something that's going on right now. But we've been looking at our district goals, we've been looking at our student success plans, our district equity plans to see where there's alignment, but we're also identifying some, you know what, maybe, for example, our technology plan might be something that we need to revisit moving forward, you know, in response to what students have learned and what they have shared with us about how they have been able to leverage technology to become successful. So those will always be in place. And that's one of the things that this team has been really helpful for me, is that final bullet on this slide here, is to ensure that we have intentional breaks to stop, pause, reflect. What do we need to do differently? And that's not only this plan, but all of our plans. So yes, you're correct.
Thank you for that. I appreciated your comments about how this isn't just to add more, right? That we want to really evaluate, because that never works well when you just keep adding.
Right.
And then finally, just while you're on for a moment, while I have you here, I'm wondering, could you talk about our seniors and what's being done to really identify those seniors that are needing additional help right now? Because of course, as Dr. Kellogg said, you know, we're looking like 18 months out and they don't have 18 months.
That's right. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Reeves if he's on here to also be prepared to support me on this, because I know he's been doing some great work with our principals and our school counselors to specifically identify what students may be short some credits and what some things are being done to ensure that we're providing them with those resources. As I mentioned, he and his team have already started some of those support plans, so that right when we came back, a lot of our kids, specifically who are transitioning from WVA to the blended and now full-in program, to make sure that they have supports so that they're going to be passing all their classes that they need and have the supports to be successful. Mr. Reeves, are you able to provide anything further about that?
Yeah, thank you, and good question. And members of the board, I'm sure you are aware that in the last several days, there's been legislation passed with an emergency clause, which allows it to be enacted immediately, which provides graduation support for not only our senior class, but our junior class, specifically around test scores, where those students are allowed to substitute the grades in those tests for the test score itself. So for example, if you have a student that received a B in government, that student would get a 4 on their test. It's very similar to what they did last year. And for the senior class, they're also allowing school districts to declare a student to be a graduate if they've met the curricular requirements and are on track to graduate. So basically, they've met the requirements as set forth by the Westerville Board of Education. And so we are going back and identifying all of the seniors because we were initially not thinking that we were going to get a break from the test scores and all of that. So we were really scrambling about what we were going to do for students coming up short. But now it's just identifying those students who are short of credit. Several of those students are in the EOS program, and Dr. Ebrecht and his staff are taking great care of them. We have tools and mechanisms at our disposal. We have the credit flex process. We have the use of our Apex licensing. We are also in the process of working on digitizing our courses so that students that may be lacking 1 or 2 credits, we have time right now to help them. And so like we did last year, we're very, very hopeful that a large, overwhelmingly large majority of our seniors will get to those football stadiums in Memorial Day and get their diploma.
Thank you so much for the detail on that. I knew that some changes had come down just recently, so thanks for talking through them, and I appreciate that we've got a little more flexibility than we originally thought that we might.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll jump in. I appreciate the comment about a plan gives us reason to celebrate. Kind of ties back to what Jen was saying and what you were saying also, Dr. Hopkins, about not layering on yet another plan, yet more, new, when there is so much that we do well and that we know how to do. What I appreciate most about what you're saying in the big picture is that this appears to be an asset-based approach. And I think that's extremely important for us to do. Instead of a deficit-based approach, it's important for all of our students. It's important for all of our staff as well. And focusing on the things that we do very well and making tweaks as we need to make those tweaks and targeting where we need to target is, I think, our best path forward. And I appreciate very much the approach that's being taken. I was concerned when I realized that there had to be yet another plan provided to the state by April the 1st, but the way we're going about it and the engagement approaches seems to me to make good sense. I do appreciate also the engagement work that's been done, not just with Thought Exchange, but also with the full involvement of our TOSAs, because those teachers on special assignment provide important teacher voice. And sometimes I think we forget the importance of that particular teacher voice, because those TOSAs bring a significant amount of expertise and connectivity to the information that they provide for us. So kudos to you for where this is going. I know it's a work in progress. There is much still to be done, but I like the direction and the way we're going.
Thank you.
So Dr. Hopkins, I would just like to follow up with my two questions. I can put together the framework pieces. I see that there. The culture and climate and integrated choice for students and families. Can you explain that a little bit more, go a little bit more in depth for me?
Sure. And that's something we are kind of prioritizing, to be perfectly honest, is what we had to get the academic and the social emotional, but the culture and climate is something that we're mindful, especially of our staff, in trying to know how difficult this year has been for them to address some of those needs. And we actually were just having a conversation yesterday to look at different ways that we can support teachers in developing a strong culture and climate, because what I've seen in the buildings has just been phenomenal the past couple of weeks. Our teachers have done a phenomenal job to really welcome and reconnect our students back to the setting. And it's a culture of just community, if you will. And those are some of the things that we're going to continue, because what we know from research is you've got to have that strong culture and climate in place before any significant learning can be done. So not only are we looking at the foundational literacy and math, but we're also looking at the culture and climate issues there. And we're going to be spending a lot of time this summer looking at specific ways to do that. So that's an issue that I know Tammy Santa and I have been having conversations about, and to address, not only student well-being, but also staff well-being along the way. So yes, those are things that we're aware of and we're moving forward with in the planning stage.
Paul, do you guys want to press on to the next part?
Sure. I'll go ahead and introduce Dr. Ebrecht, who will be talking about our summer learning opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Wonderful to be here again. 26 years I've been having conversations around summer learning, and as the school administrator in Westerville. And yes, we're coming out of the pandemic, but at the same time, we've been very intentional in our summer learning, and we've been a model for districts. And it's wonderful that we have this in place. People call us, ask us, what do you do in the summer? And it always comes back to, do you have a board that supports it? And we have a board over the 26 years I've been in Westerville that has always been supportive of our enrichment opportunities for our students, but also targeted intervention during the summer. And this summer, we're going to be back in person, we fully anticipate, and better than ever. And so I just want to go through what we are doing so that we are thoughtful, we are intentional, and we have that targeted intervention that we need, not only to prevent summer regression, but also pandemic regression. Dr. Kellogg, I agree full-heartedly that we've had kids that have excelled and done well in a virtual setting, while at the same time, we acknowledge there's kids that need that extra support, targeted intervention, and we believe that we can provide that in the summer and get students in large part through remediation efforts, especially in reading and math. It's targeted, and take them to next. So with our elementary program, we are combining our K-5. In the past, we've had a K-3, a 4-8, and a 9-12. We're going to house our K-5 program under one roof and service those students intently over at Hawthorne Elementary. Middle school, our 6-8 program will be at North, and our high school program, we're going to focus on credit recovery, course advancement, and the board, again, as we continue to enhance ourselves, we're going to be offering musical production, which I'm extremely excited to talk about here in just a little bit. Next slide, please. So you can see here our dates. We're providing this to our community. It's on our website. If you type in Westerville Summer School Learning, you'll find first link. This will take you to a page all about our programming, the dates, and we realize that in our elementary program, it needs to, again, be very targeted, skill-based. At the middle school, we've learned over time, we need to make sure that we are having a holistic approach to this, make sure that it's engaging to those students, and through that process, we've seen great increase in enrollment. The board challenged us about 3 years ago to increase enrollment, and in subsequent years we have. Actually, I think that was 4 years ago. And then also our 9 through 12 program, again, the whole piece about credit recovery versus course advancement and what that looks like, we're going to talk about. And we, of course, we continue to offer physical education. Next slide. So our elementary program, Dr. Kellogg mentioned iReady. It's a wonderful tool for us to ascertain what our kids need in terms of academic intervention, and we can provide that through these diagnostics. And again, it's going to be in reading and mathematics. I'm very pleased to say that we've been extremely conscientious over the years regarding fees. This year, I am very excited that there will be no charge for our students on free and reduced lunch. Zero. We've worked hard with partnering communities, like with just different in-house communities, partnerships, and we've provided scholarship opportunities. This year, you can almost say everyone has a scholarship that's on free reduced lunch. It's zero cost. And we've also reduced our price for full pay. Anyone that does not have free reduced lunch, in the past it was $150. This year it's going to be $75. And we have breakfast and lunch covered. Carrie Dennis called me today. We talked through that. And so we're excited to be able to provide that opportunity for our elementary students, breakfast and lunch. And it's a 4-hour program. It will run 8:30 to 12:30. Next slide for middle school. So in our middle school program, we realize that this whole idea about filling academic gaps, but we need to make sure that we're doing it in an experiential basis where kids are excited to come. You know, that you got the elementary kids who just enjoy school in general. Then you got your high school kids, they need the credit in order to graduate. In the middle school, we have this group of students that, you know, do they really want to come? Would they rather do other things? What we're trying to do is have a program that this is a great option, a great thing to come to, and you're going to enjoy yourself. So we focus on this like a STEAM-oriented activities. We're going to be using the land lab, the pond over there at North. We're going to use the shop. Kids are going to be creating things, but it's all going to have a focus in the area of English language arts, mathematics, the engineering, the science. All that's going to be interplayed, and we have top-notch teachers that, even including an art teacher, that will be there and doing things with graphic novels, for example. So we look forward to that. And once again, fees are waived, no charge. If you're on free reduced lunch, $75 full pay. Then I'm excited. Next slide, please, Jill. About our high school enrichment opportunity, our summer musical. Last year, you know, we were going to have a wonderful musical production, but then the pandemic hit, and then we did a virtual one. And while many high schools chose not to do anything, we continued and moved forward and had a virtual play. Students did a wonderful job putting that on, and students blossomed from that opportunity. And so we're going to be hopefully in person now, and we have, you know, I was talking to Matt Wolf today, and he has the various team members ready. Kim Mollahan, I know, has shared some interest as well from North, and then Stephanie from Central. And we're going to continue to work together collaboratively to put on a wonderful production. And we look forward to having it in-house at Westerville North High School this summer. I'm not sure what seating capacity we're going to have, but we're going to be hopefully in person for that. And we do offer elective credit. And it's $25 per student. And of course, we have community partnerships that help offset the overall cost. The board has provided dollars for this in the past, and we hope that it will continue to be a break even, or in fact, we might make even a little bit of money on the production itself. And then from a high school perspective, I want to continue with that. Our credit advancement is actually going to be free to students. Excuse me, let me back up. Anybody that's recovering credit, it's free. So students that may have failed a course are going to be able to take that course for free this summer. And then for credit advancement, we've cut the tuition in half. So if a half credit is $100, and for a credit advancement for one credit, it's $200. In the past, a full credit was $400. And we've been using what are called ESSER funds for that. And that's going to help us reduce our cost to families. So for example, if a student wanted to advance a credit, half credit in health, it would be $100 per student as opposed to $200. So we feel we have a summer learning opportunities program where all students can come. In terms of invitation based for elementary, based on data that we have through iReady. Middle school is again through teacher collaboration with our administrative staff on who we feel is most at risk. And then our high school kids, anyone can come to that program. Again, credit recovery or credit advancement. And then of course, again, we have our musical production. So bottom line is we're being very intentional. And I do want to celebrate because I see what happens behind the scenes. And in these meetings, Barb Wallace, Scott Reeves, step up advocating for kids, Dr. Hopkins' leadership as well, looking at ways in which we can get better at serving students and support them, taking the opportunity during a crisis situation. How can we advance ourselves? So I appreciate everyone's leadership in that, and Dr. Kellogg's as well, especially on a Central Ohio basis. So that's it for summer. You've heard me talk about summer. I'm excited about this coming summer yet again, and continuing to enrich our students, but also remediate skills that have been lost over the past several months. And we believe that we can take them forward. So thank you. Questions about summer?
I was going to ask Dr. Hopkins, if you wouldn't mind, maybe to comment a little bit more on some of the other efforts that are still going on in terms of the other kinds of opportunities we're looking at creating. Is that a fair question, Dr. Hopkins?
The summer learning, we're also, and this is, I'm glad you teed me up there. I was waiting to try to jump in. We're looking at a program tentatively called Ignite, but we haven't landed on that one entirely. Is one of the things that we got from our feedback from Thought Exchange was students' desire to reconnect, and not always reconnect in math and English, but learning other skills, whether it's money management, cooking, just a variety of different life skills or success skills that students wanted to do. Maybe it was to increase their practice when they're band, for example. So what we're going to be doing very soon is we're going to be sending out kind of a request for proposals. So I think maybe Ms. Davison, you were talking about like some of the culture and climate and student interest and staff interest. We're going to be providing opportunities for teachers to say, you know what, I'd really like to expand on this learning opportunity this summer, and then have almost a catalog of opportunities that they have suggested and other topics that students have voiced, and then have students sign up for these opportunities over the summer. So we're really excited about this as an extension or an enrichment learning opportunity that goes beyond the summer learning program as we have there. And we think that these will be learning opportunities that address some of that culture and climate issues, but also for staff as well, because we know that staff are working incredibly hard right now. They're doing a phenomenal job. I can't stress that enough. Every time I go out there, we're just constantly amazed amazed by the wonderful work they're doing. But they have said, you know what, I'd like to have some professional learning around this. And so we're going to be hopefully having, maybe hosting some sessions for teachers, learning with teachers and learning from their expertise along the way. So we're really excited about those opportunities as well. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed and didn't speak about that a little bit earlier, but yes.
Thank you.
So, Scott Ebrecht, you were talking about the reduction in fees, which I think is great, and I'm excited about that. But I'm wondering if you can fill me in a little bit on what are we looking at as regards cost to the district?
The cost of the district is about an extra $45,000. But again, it's being paid through ESSER funds, but that's about what I've estimated it's going to be.
Great, thank you. And have we been looking into transportation issues?
Well, several years ago, it's wonderful because we know the history, Nancy, over several years, how we've added transportation and taken that totally off the table in terms of what I mean by that is every student has an opportunity to be transported in the summer. So there is no issue with that, and transportation has been put into the budget, and we've had that, and that's a significant amount of money. It's probably about a $75,000 option, but yet we know that we need to level the playing field for our families. And over time, there was one time, for example, we didn't have kindergarten as part of summer learning. We added that. There was one time we only transported K through 5 students. Then we added K through 8. Then we added K through 12. So yes, transportation's covered, but again, it goes back to a board, and I'm not placating the board, but I will say the board has provided us those resources. So when people call me from outside of our communities and ask about how we have summer learning, and I put all the components together, at the end of the day, they need a board that will support it. Okay, resources are not infinite; they're finite, and we take advantage of that, and we appreciate the board supporting us.
I do think that sometimes we forget that other districts don't do summer school the way we do summer school, and it's kind of amazing what is able to be done. And Scott, I thank you so much for all of your work over all of these years in turning this into the incredibly successful program that it always has been. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how it plays out this summer, especially with that re-engagement focus that we have. And I'm also interested in the components that Paul, you were just talking about. It seems to me that it's almost an opportunity for a family to design a camp. So you can choose the courses that you would want to be engaged in, whether those are enrichment opportunities like you were talking about with cooking or whatever that turns out to be, engagement opportunities there, enrichment opportunities, and then the ability, if necessary, to engage in the intervention approaches, whatever that package might look like for families. There's been a lot of stuff as parents try to determine what's going on with their kids this summer. As I listen to what we are proposing to do with summer school, I really do see design a camp for families, which I think is an exciting evolution for our particular summer program. Thank you for all of this hard work.
So Scott, can we talk a little bit about enrollment? I know in the past you had some data. We talked about how many kids were invited and then how many actually took us up on it. Do you have that, or do you remember any of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so in our summer programming, typically in the elementary program, we will invite around 1,600 students, and okay, we'll get around probably around 450 that take us up on that. It'll be interesting this summer, given that the pandemic and the degree to which we do that. We'll see what families want to do. I know some families have said that they want to engage, and other families are saying we just want to take a break and start fresh in August. There's no arm turning. Families have to do what they feel is best for their family. But what we try to do is take them where they are, and we will take any student that we know through our diagnostics, through our data, because we definitely are being objective about it in terms of inviting those kids that we feel need it, and then it's up to the family to choose, and then we will transport them and feed them and be with them for a good part of a summer day for 4 weeks.
Sure. And so as you look at the data and the different components we have now to target kids, do you expect the numbers to be about the same as far as invitations?
Yeah, we're actually going to probably be inviting about 300 more elementary students, for example, K through 5, than we've had in the past. Middle school is about the same. And, because it's COVID, I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of, in the past I could always predict because we had, solid data every year after year after year. Because of this opportunity, and also, there's still some families that they still, they're choosing not to come into school for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
So you have that component too. So we just got, I don't know what the data says. And you know what? I hope we don't have to have trend data on pandemics. Okay. Yeah. So one and done, and then it's a blip, and then we move forward and start going back to the previous data set, which was 2 years ago.
Okay. And then there's no way we would cap it, correct? Only accept a certain amount of kids?
Tracy, we would never do that. I was trying to think of a good thing to say, but I would resign if we were told to not to cap it rather, but that'll never happen.
I think the controlling resource isn't going to be, it will be enough teachers to staff the demand.
Right.
So on the other side of this is a teaching force that's pretty tired too. So what we want to do is be intentional in our invitation process to families, to make clear the need and awareness, to open the aperture of access by reducing costs, taking costs away, taking transportation away. Notice 2 meals provided, which is another attractive piece, to try and attract more people to the program. And then whoever doesn't participate, we still have that cohort of kids understand, okay, what does that mean for next fall for that cohort of kids? Because now you have a percentage of your kids that you identified for intervention this summer who opted not to, a percentage that went in, and they're going to remix in the fall. And now you really have 3 cohorts. A cohort of kids that we didn't identify for needed interventions, a cohort that came in the summer, and a cohort that we identified but didn't come. So what does that mean for the fall? So that's where this thing starts to evolve. So we will make it as accessible as possible, and we're going to do our best not to make limited. And I think it'd probably be worth clarifying, if the board doesn't mind. I might ask Ms. Marshall to explain a little bit about the ESSER part of this, because we're throwing out an acronym, and there maybe people are wondering, what's an ESSER? So, Ms. Marshall, you might want to clarify that for folks.
Yeah, so this is part of one of the many relief acts that the federal government has done. So it's ESSER, ESSER. It's the Education Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Grant, I believe. So we are looking at round 2. We had round 1 earlier in the year, so this is round 2. So that's where the budget for this is coming from. And ESSER is meant to help address some of the learning loss that schools are seeing due to the pandemic. So this fits right in with everything that they're planning to do.
So
Tracy, I'll also say, I'm sorry, you were asking about staffing, and staffing we have fully covered in terms of we have plenty of applicant pool to be able to staff this fully depending upon what we need.
Sure, and really my question to you was more of what a welcoming environment that has been created for our kids and our families, and that all of them were welcome, that we wouldn't push anyone away. So I should have asked it in another way. And while we talk about, you said something about leaving, I want to congratulate you on your retirement.
Thank you very much.
So, and thank you for all that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I've been taking a lot of notes through all of this beginning, Dr. Kellogg, and there's no way I'm going to be able to do this thread justice, but let me give an observation, and then Dr. Kellogg, Dr. Hopkins, Dr. Ebrecht, Dr. Hyde, any other doctor on here want to jump in there, that's okay as well. What I noticed from the very beginning, Dr. Kellogg, you began with what you called points of progress: social emotional well-being, academic achievement, culture, climate, equity, accessibility. One of the bullets under equity and accessibility said a commitment to each voice, which I think is a really great statement. Dr. Hopkins then came in and said, one of the things we have is this identification section in which we are going to ask questions: what students have been most impacted? And I'm also hearing you say something about our staff. How have they been impacted? Then that fleshed out to continue. I'm pulling on this thread here, so pay attention. So that went into where Dr. Ebrecht was saying we have all of these different components lined up for wherever a student happens to find themselves, or where a teacher identifies a student, or a parent, a community member identifies a student as needing some kind of support, right? And then on top of that, I'm hearing that we are going to go, I would say, an extra mile, where we're going to start identifying these voices. Remember, every voice counts. These voices that may not have a library card. These voices that need something extra in the community, and whether that's some of the classes that, Paul, you were citing, financial management, cooking, all of these extra options that another doctor, Nancy Nestor Baker, was identifying as build your own camp, which is what I like that idea a lot. So this sounds like I'm just pointing out disparate members of this, but every one of those things that I just cited is a part of a thread that says no matter where any student is, we want to create a place for them. Which takes us back to Westerville City School District is, say it out loud,
Where you belong.
where you belong. So I'm just pointing out, and any of you can respond to this, I'm just pointing out that I am exceedingly pleased and proud of the work that Dr. Kellogg, it sounds like you began with a bunch of other superintendents in a room with well, maybe not cigars, in a room with each other, well, on the phone. And
Just coffee.
And talking about how can we in Central Ohio perhaps lead the way for Ohio, not only in our summer programs, but in these niche programs around the edge as well. I cannot tell you how good I think it is when we cooperate with other districts, other boards of education, in trying to identify where are the needs and how can we make sure every voice does count. This is how I'm wrapping it up, going back to that very first statement. If we're going to have equity and accessibility, then even the voices you may not want to hear need to count. Even the voices that disagree with you need to count. And it sounds like to me, Dr. Hopkins, you and this team behind the scenes are saying to our students, no matter how far behind you feel you are or how far you want to get ahead, we are going to have a place for you. And I, for one, just speaking for myself, I don't speak for the board. For one, I'm very thankful for all of you, the dozens of people that have been involved in this effort. to make sure that no student is left behind.
If I can, I would like to just also throw out a, excuse me, an appreciation that this is how we're using those ESSER funds. I think it's an exciting program and an appropriate use of the funds. And I think we'll see the data, you know, that we are set up for it to have a really great impact for students. And Dr. Ebrecht, I especially want to thank you for the middle school, the way you framed the middle school experience in the summer. I know we've done a lot of work on middle school over the past few years, but really making something engaging and taking advantage of those assets that we have at Westerville North, my alma mater, which is a great school, by the way, using the land lab and, you know, using the shop there. So I just want to thank you for putting that together in a way that kids can be excited about it, because that's a hard age to motivate to want to do something in the summer. And so I guess if I were to end with a question, and I don't know really who should address this, but if you're a family and you have a student who's been struggling in an academic content area, but maybe you're not identified for summer intervention, or you're not quite sure what next steps to take, obviously reaching out to the teacher is probably, you know, among the best things to do. But for people who maybe want to revisit those assessments or have a little bit more insight into what their students' scores are telling them, how should they go about doing that?
Well, I think a couple of things I'd say. One, and Barb and Scott, you may want to pipe on this, because I would think not only that classroom teacher, school counselor, principal, advocate, advocate, advocate. Don't assume because an invitation didn't come that we're not interested in hearing what your need is. So advocating for your child as a parent, advocating for yourself as a student, teachers advocating for their kids, bring it to us so that we can continue that. And I think that's a great communication point that we can work through with Barb and Scott and our principals and our school counselors moving forward, because we want to make sure people feel confident that they're going to get something that they feel they need. I have a general rule in life: never assume I know more about what a child needs than their parent knows what they need for them. So I'm not going to assume I know what they need more than what the parent says they need. So we need to look at that, regardless of what any couple of data points said. There may be other reasons in there. I think, you know, the other part of this summer school program that's worth mentioning, because we did a lot of the academic, but I know at the elementary level, Barb, you had mentioned some wellness pieces on either side of the academic pieces. Do you want to mention that real quick too? Because I think that's an ingredient that should be discussed as well. And I think that's another part of why people might want to access this, right, beyond the academic. Barb, would you mind doing that?
Well, we have a 3-hour block from starting at 9, but school starts at 8:30, and that 8:30 gives children an opportunity not only to have breakfast, but for teachers to hold morning meeting, where we work through different components of the PATHS program, which is our social emotional learning component. So we're incorporating that into every day of summer school, just because we know that's a really important part of what students need.
And Dr. Hopkins, am I correct? There was some discussion about adding some school counseling staff in the summer school program. Am I correct? Would you
Yes,
talk
that's
about
correct.
that?
Yes, we're looking at adding 2 counselors to support that.
That have, in many cases, have a mental health background.
Correct. Thank you.
So, you know, so you put this whole thing together, and there's other reasons why a parent may feel on top of the academic piece that we want to look at. The only other thing I want to talk about in terms of setting expectations moving forward is, okay, this is our first shot at taking our core summer school program that's there, which is the meat of what Dr. Ebrecht shared this evening. This is a replication of what we've done in the past. We know it works. We're mindful that there may be an expansion of access of people who need, both from our end and from families. So that's one piece. Then there's these other innovative pieces that we want to try and start to build together to see what we can put in the summer that could be exciting around these other kinds of opportunities for kids we can do that are non-traditional learning pieces, like, you know, taking Coach Jackson's course on how to change a tire on the car, right? Some of us have seen that piece, right? And it's kind of a cool piece. And I can tell you, when we did the thought exchange with students, it seemed like their parents are filling out the information for them, because there was a lot on, teach me about finance, teach me about my checkbook, teach me how to change a tire, teach me how to bake, teach me how to cook, teach me life skills. So it sounds like some of the 16-year-olds might have been napping while their parents are filling out the thought exchange piece for them. Either way, trying to capitalize on those. But those are going to be pieces where we're looking internally into the system for people who want to match up what students said they'd like to do with things that they like to do with kids. So that's going to be the how does that go part. And it may be very robust. It may be smaller this year and growing down the line. We want to put a toe in that water. It's kind of a teacher designed to meet what the student voice is saying piece along the way. So there's still a lot to put around this from our core moving out. But we know we got the core piece in that we're good at, and the school counseling piece, the mental health piece is all putting more into that. And then what else can we do? So, you know, what we see this summer will be a step, and that may lead us to bigger steps as we move forward, even into the school year. Any other questions? I didn't mean to truncate off. I just thought to throw that part in.
From my questions, thank you for that. I appreciate that, and the holistic and robust thinking, and yeah, that message, you know, to families. If you feel like, you know, I guess on the parent side, some of us have seen that, you know, maybe kids eked it out in something, but like the suffering that it took to get there is something we'd like to help them, you know, with, so that it's not repeated next year, right? So those experiences that families have, I appreciate that we're open and inclusive in this. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Kellogg or Dr. Hopkins, Dr. Ebret?
Ms. Davidson, did that give you more the detail that you were looking for? I want to make sure we didn't, if there's something in there we failed to hit on, and make sure we cover it for you.
Yes, very much. I'm super excited about all these opportunities. Very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those reports.